down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
How you doing, real estate investor out there? You just tuned in to the Savvy Radio Show. Hopefully you're doing good. Hopefully you went out and bought a crib, a house, not a crib for you to stay in, but a crib for somebody else to stay in. Today, we're going to talk about leases. Now, you got to keep in mind, this is a couple of days before investor weekend, and my life is upside down. You might hear some construction noise in the background. We're remodeling the office. So if you hear some saws and people screaming, maybe even cursing back there, I do apologize on the front end. Also, my focus is all over the place, so I may even contradict myself. That's possible. If you've listened to any of my stuff thus far, or this is your first time, you may never come back after today, because I'm going to be all over the place. But I needed to come up with a subject that I believe is important, and important to you as a real estate investor, even if you're a veteran or you're a first timer, is, I think, a critical piece to your business, and that is the residential lease. Now, when I talk about lease in general, rent to own lease is a little bit different. Commercial leases and a commercial property is different. I'm talking about a lease between you, the landlord, and or property manager, and with the tenant or resident. All right. So I'm going to go through my lease, and then I'm going to kind of go over a couple other leases and some things that you need to have in your lease and what you need to know. The lease that I'm going to go over is actually on my website. If you want a copy of that, just go to the savvyradioshow.com, or I believe go to savvylandlord.me or the Savvy Landlord book, whatever. But you can find me somewhere. Also, mrlandlord.com/lease has a lease on there. It's pretty basic, but I'm going to cover that lease as well. And, here we go. All right. First of all, you got to understand that this is an instrument. This is an agreement between you and this other person. Now, over the years, I've heard prideful real estate investors, man, I got a 40-page lease, Also, I've seen leases after purchasing property that's like one page. I even heard of a landlord that doesn't even operate on a lease. Okay. Well, first of all, a lease, an agreement, a contract states out what I'm going to provide and what they are going to do to get to what I am providing. Now, keep in mind, when you create a lease, okay, you think you're savvy or clever that you have all these weird lines in there. They have to coincide with the law. Okay, so that would be my first thing. Kind of understand the law. I do have an audiobook out there that goes over Oklahoma law, the Oklahoma Law Tenant Act. You can Google that up for your market, for your area. You could read it. I'm not a big time on reading law stuff, so I like to listen to it as I have some free time in the gym. But that's on you. All right. First of all, don't be weak and don't make your lease just random. Okay. You need to understand what you're doing as a landlord. There's no excuses, especially if you're in front of a judge. They're assuming that you're already super millionaire. They're assuming that you know the law. They're assuming that you're informed. Okay. So read the mother. All right. Read the mother lease. Okay. Understand it. If you don't understand it, that's fine. You may not know what the word addendum means. All right. I didn't know what that means. I'm not an attorney. But you may be savvy, or you may not be savvy, or you may be real reverse. But hey, we're going to cover one quick definition. And it says on Webster's website, something that is added, especially a section of a book that is added to the main or the original text. That's an addendum, right? It doesn't even say anything about the law in here. But anytime I ever hear the word addendum, it comes with the contract. Now, whatever advice I say today on this podcast, radio show, there's no guarantee. Okay. So don't do what I do and try to come back and say, hey, Van Kallenberg said, do this. This is my own interpretation. And this is just from years of experience and running properties for almost 20 years. So it's not perfect science, but some of the things that are working for me may not be working for you. So you need to just consider that yourself. ultimately, you want to consult with an attorney. Yeah, I know that's cliche. People hear that all the time. Consult with an attorney, blah, blah, blah. No, for real, you should consult with an attorney. All right. So here's a couple of things right out the gate that I've gotten stung recently within the last couple of years. One, I had a really bad professional tenant and I had to jack that guy out. And we filed on him and we're ready to go to court. And the guy pulled us to the side. He kind of knew some of the law. And the first thing that the guy pointed out to my attorney was the terms are wrong on the lease. I'm like, what? The terms are, what are you talking about? They were. It says on the top of my lease, this is a residential 12-month, 1-year lease. Well, I did the math wrong, and when I put the date start September 1st and end on this date, it was actually 13 months. I know that's kind of weird, but if the judge was not feeling good that day and really wanted to be a dork, he could have, in another word with a D, he could have just thrown out of court, well, this document no longer exists because it's not truth, because the terms. I know that's kind of overreaching, but the point is, you need to make sure that the terms are correct, meaning the lease amount, when it's due, when does it start, and when does it end. And don't try to be clever and add all these weird things in big words and all this other jazz. The simpler, the better. The first thing, if you ever take someone to court or go to eviction court or anything, the first thing the judge is going to say right out the gate, and you need to know this, is a little tip for you, where's your lease? Now, you would think, I debate this with my property manager all the time. We need to add this in the lease. We need to do this in the lease. And she said to me the other day, she's like, the judges don't even read the lease. Well, that's not necessarily true. They may not read it at that moment, but if there was something seriously going wrong, I've seen a judge pull over and read the whole thing in front of me and mark things out and do weird things, and they're in control. So, just consider your lease as a guide, okay? It's not bulletproof. Nothing is bulletproof. And a 60-page lease is ridiculous. I'm not sure how many pages my lease is, but it's like 5 or 6. It's pretty strong, but what is strong, right? And enforceable. All right, I'm going to go through my lease. As I said earlier, I just put residential lease. I take the word year to year off and 12 months off. When does this lease start? When did we sign this lease? You have to identify what we're leasing, okay? And that's the premise, okay? In that case, that's in clause 2. So clause 1 of my lease is who we are as property management and or landlord, and who they are and their name and all the tenants that are living in the property, all the residents, tenants, whatever you want to call them. Then clause 2 is the address, and then on there, the properties, and that would be like furniture, if you're going to lease out furniture, or refrigerator, stove, oven. You need to document that stuff. And here's another tip for you. Document and take pictures of the security number, the serial number. People tend to steal things, all right? And I'm not even high-end homes have lost side-by-side $1,500 refrigerators. Well, you could use that, call the police, you need that information, and then you can record that loss on the tenants, on their credit report. So, for example, if they stole a $1,500 refrigerator, you got the serial number, you call the police, you get a police report, and then you file that against your tenant. Limits of use, clause 3, who's going to be in the property. And I have a clause in my lease that might be pretty good for you, but if you move someone in without me knowing more than 2 weeks, that we charge $100 a person. Now, how do we identify that? That's to interpretation. But I reference this clause all the time. Like, for example, an apartment building, someone complains there's too many people living above them. And I'm like, what do you mean? They only got one person on the lease. I just photocopy this part, send them a bill for $100 a month. And then usually that stops, or they add that person to the lease. You got clause 4, which is about the term, how long it is. And then I'm very meticulous about when to do the 30-day notice. In Oklahoma, you can't just randomly show up here. And this goes for me too, that hey, it's the 10th. I'm moving out at the end of the month. Well, that's not a proper 30-day notice in the state of Oklahoma. And I'm assuming in all states. Okay. But that's just just for my knowledge, is that when I say proper, and I quote the Oklahoma Landlord-Tenant Act, that a proper 30-day notice has to be served on or before the first of the month. That's right. So if you roll up in here on the 2nd and give us a 30-day notice, most landlords would bow down and say, okay, and it depends on if that's an advantage for you, because if you really want that deadbeat out. But hey, if they show up on September 15th and say, hey, I'm moving out October 15th, I'm going to say, no, you're not. We'll take your 30-day notice, but that's the full 30 days of October. Your move out date is October 31st. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So if you present a 30-day notice after the first of the month, the notice will go into effect starting the first of the following month. And we're very clear. And I know if you're a landlord and a veteran landlord, or even have experienced this is the giant headache, because you need that 30-day notice to change the property over to the next tenant. You need as much time as possible. And of course, we're all selfish, and that tenant's selfish as well. They just want to move out. They haven't found a new place, bought a new home, and I'm happy for them. But that we still need to follow the law, and the law says you must give a proper 30-day notice. I know that I spent a little too much time on that, but you need to know. On clause 5 of my lease, it goes over the rent. What's the rent cost? What's going to happen? I added this a couple of years ago, and it says this. It says, when the rent is not paid by the first of the month, you may receive a district court notice. And I bring this very clear. And it says this is a 5-day notice to quit. That's pretty standard around the country. It says this notice will be certified mailed to you, and you will be charged a $7 a month fee to your account. And it must be paid the next period of your rent. Okay. And then we go into clause 6, late charges in Oklahoma. There's no law that says you can charge late rents, and there's different states that says you can't. There's all kinds of debate, and some judges say usury laws over late fees. I say charge late fees. I've been to court, and the judge will just remove all the late fees for the whole year. So if I send a ledger with me, which I don't whip out my tenant ledger, okay, your tenant statement, hopefully you're keeping good books. Definitely use a good software to run your properties. But, don't just volunteer information when you go to court unnecessary, because sometimes they want to see the ledger, meaning they want to see the tenant statement. And I've had judges, remove all the late fees. Some judges on that day were, feeling charitable, and why are we charging late fees? In Oklahoma, there's really not a law. It's kind of a big deal, but in other states, you can charge late fees. It's up to a certain percentage or a certain number. Know what the law says in your market. All right, so I'm ranting way too much here. Number 7 on my lease, it says return checks. We charge a fee. Goes into number 8, security deposit. How much we're getting now. The word deposit and the word fee. Let's get into that real fast. One, you don't want to take a pet deposit, because the word deposit means is that, and it's in the law, it's refundable. Okay. No, we take a pet fee. We charge you a fee, F-E-E, for you to have your pet in our property. Be very clear between pet deposit and security deposit. In the law, it says that the deposit is required to be returned to the tenant minus any expenses that were incurred that are beyond normal wear and tear. Okay. So, and it says in the law that we have 30 days to get it back to you. Now, everybody wants to move out. They want their deposit tomorrow, and they want all their money back. And here's the deal. I'm very upfront with tenants. I know there's a lot of ghetto landlords out there, and I am so sorry that people manipulate and steal people's security deposit. We're straight up front. Our goal here is to give you your deposit back. We don't want this money, because if we're taking this money from you, that means it's costing us something. It's costing us a repair. It's costing us time. Whatever it is, please, I would love to refund your $500 security deposit. Do these things. And I have it very spelled out. The law says this: if it's any repair above that's more than wear and tear, and what is defined wear and tear, that's another interpretation. All right. But our goal is to give them their security deposit back, because if I give their security deposit back, they're happy, they're motivated, I'm happy, I'm motivated, I get a new tenant in there, it's broom clean, it's perfect, it's the way they found it. Obviously, to protect yourself, again, landlords, veterans out there, they do this, take photos, take video. I even, one step even stronger that I do now, I record all of my leases with an audio recorder. It's Olympus. It's like $50 on Amazon. And I go, hey, I'm just going to let you know I'm going to record this lease. I don't want to say anything that's you can be interpreted wrong, and so on and so forth. And you know, I won't sign a lease with someone unless we're recording it. Clause 9 is utilities. It says cleared out, spelled out, up, down, round down, whatever you call it, who pays for what, and the utilities. You know, on our side, it says you're paying for all utilities. That means electricity, water bill. And some people in some states, you need to, if you're in an apartment building, it may not be, it's included in the rent, but you need to spell it out. Clause 10 is an assignment, subletting. You can't just rent this, sign this lease and then bounce out and then charge $100 to your homie and let them move in. We don't allow that automatic termination of the lease. With clause 11, it goes into detail of what maintenance responsibility, keep the home clean, free of bugs and things like that. We don't spray for pests after today. Clause 12 talks about repairs and alterations. Like you can't just remodel and throw up some walls without our approval. And I put a new clause in there in the last couple of years that says to be compliant, another stern way of the Oklahoma Tenant Act, you must have all maintenance and repair requests in writing. And so if I get that on tape, and so it says, and it's recorded, dear Sally, new tenant, you must inform us in writing. Because I'm in a slip and fall case right now, and you know they didn't have a railing on there. Well, the guy didn't let us know that there was a railing, but when he moved in, there was a railing. You see what I'm saying? So when you go to the judge, they have a different story. The tenant has a different story than you do. Now, photos prove a story. So does audio. And we have this in our lease. We make it very known that you must communicate everything in writing. All right. It seems kind of childish to talk like this, or abrasive, or I don't know what the vibe is. But here's the deal. You need to protect yourself at all costs. Clause 13, violating the laws. Basically, if you start doing some outside things of what the law of the land is in that county, for example, there's a law in a Midwest city that if there's any kind of narcotics in the property, it's automatic termination. At least basically, it accelerates the process of due process of evicting you. It's an automatic eviction if they get picked up on some kind of drugs or something. 14 clause, it talks about pest. It's a non-refundable. It says deposit on my internet thing. It's a fee. Make sure you correct that. If you download this lease from me, you need to correct clause 14. It says non-refundable pet deposit. And the main reason why I even know this is because a judge made it very clear. This is a deposit. You cannot keep this fee or this, and I had to refund that back. So the next day I went and changed the lease. Also in the state of Oklahoma, and I'm assuming everywhere else, that you have to, clause 615 says the right to enter the property. Now, I have been back and forth with tenants. They won't let me in the tenant. They've changed the locks. Here's the deal. The state law says this. You must give a 24-hour notice before entering the premise of a property. And you can do that. And so I have this I'm very clear on this, and it's very clear in my lease, and it's added on here. And it says this, you should add this in your lease in any state. It says, should a request for service call be made, meaning a repair, maintenance, sink, whatever, a tenant is granting permission for the landlord agents to immediately access the premise, negating the 24-hour stipulation. Meaning, if you call me and says you call our office and say, hey, fix this sink, we don't have to wait 24 hours to enter your property. Okay, that means all your little contraband that you have laying around on the couch, which you'd be surprised what we see when we go into property. You might want to think about that. And we let people know that, it's your privacy. But when you call us and ask us for a maintenance, you're granting us permission to enter your property. Clause 16 talks about extended absences of, more than 7 days. For example, if you're going to go out of the country, let us know. Because, we can throw up an abandonment notice and start checking out where you're at. And so that's in there. Here's a clause 17 that you're taking possession. One tip for you landlords out there or rookies, that you make sure the word possession, what does that mean? Keys, like they sign the lease. I found out I had a case against Section 8, and we went round and round, and possession to them is that the tenant, their leasee, has the utilities in their name. That is possession. Okay. In my world, I thought possession was, hey, you sign the lease and everything's cool. Nope. So before you sign a lease, make sure that they have utilities turned on. That means they are taking possession. All right, that's clause 17. Clause 18, hey, court costs that are occurred, they're on you. Disclosures number 19. One thing that a lot of people don't know, if you just all of a sudden got born into rental property, how would you know all the laws, right? You just don't know this stuff. That's why hopefully this podcast will be a successful podcast, because I'm going through these laws with you, or these disclosures and all this stuff. But one disclosure I really was kind of casual with for many years until I met Mr. Landlord is the lead-based paint pamphlet. Okay, anything I think it's before 1978, you have to have people sign off on that. And it's a federal offense. And lead-based and all that jazz is serious business, so you want to make sure you have all the proper disclosures. There's other disclosures that I have in my lease, like a mold addendum and smoke detector addendum. And maybe we'll chat about that in a few minutes. Anyway, so we're getting to the end. Clause number 20, author and receive authority to receive legal. Yep, you can serve me here all legal documents at our property. Clause 21, everything's valid in here. That's legal mumbo jumbo. Clause 22, termination of the lease. What happens? I love 23, oral representation. Basically, anything I say really doesn't matter. It has to be in this lease. Plus, I record it audible. And then in clause 24, just another legalese thing. Everything is into its entirety in this document. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So my lease is 4 pages, pretty down. Now it has grown. Now I have other addendums that are added on there to it. Another thing that I definitely would recommend that you should have is a security deposit agreement. I have it on the bottom of my lease. It's something that I've added on maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Can't remember. But, I was having tenants just say, hey, I'm moving out at the end of the month and I'm not going to pay my rent this month. What? No, you're not. A deposit. Oh, I'm going to use my security deposit for the rent. No, you're not. What a security deposit is for damages or anything that's above wear and tear. So make sure you're aware of that as well and communicate that to the tenant that they cannot use their security deposit for their rent. Okay. So that was my personal lease that I have put together, have had attorneys look at it, so on and so forth. Now we're on MrLandlords.com/lease. This is my homie. I really appreciate Jeffrey Taylor, what he does for landlords across the country. I really believe that he raises a standard. He raises a standard by just calling them residents versus tenants. It's kind of a nicer tone. Tenant seems negative. Landlord is definitely a negative word, but call it what it is. So he has some of the basic things that I have already covered. One thing that I looked at, clause 8 on his, says liquid filled furnitures. I guess it's a little dated, but people used to have water beds. He also has parking on here. That's another one. I have a side note that says you can't park on the grass. It's against the law anyway. He has on here number 10, noise. He has destruction of premises. This is a free lease that he has that I should probably cut and paste and add into my lease. He has property management clause, house rules clause, termination clause, insurance clause. See, I have all those are separate addendums in mine. No waiver. That's number 22. It says no waiver. Owner's acceptance of rent with knowledge of default resident, a waiver owner of any breach of any term. I don't know what that means, but read it. Check it out. Attorney fees, jointly and servantly. Lead-based paint notification. He's got that in here. He talks about keys. So this is a really good lease example that you might want to look into. So that's it on leases. Here's some things. If you listen to the Elizabeth, I can't remember her name, Osgrove off the top of my head. She lives by addendums. Here's some addendums that you need to be aware of. Appliance addendum. What's that? I rent my appliances out to my tenants. So for example, the refrigerator and washer and dryer and things like that, those are extra add-ons. I make extra revenue off of them, yes, but I also have a separate agreement or addendum or lease. Again, pet fees would be addendum, a non-smoking addendum. These are a filter addendum. I have a filter notice. My addendum flyer, it's on my website. Basically, if you don't change the air filter and the heat and air guy comes out there and it's dirty, or the maintenance man comes out there and it's dirty, we take a photo and we charge you a $125 fee for that. Addendums, if there's an HOA situation that there's like a conflict with HOA, you have an addendum for that. You have an addendum for changing locks. I mean, you can go all day long on addendums. But anyway, what you need to do is be reversed in your lease. All right. If I said anything that's weird or bizarre, please let me know. You know, there's no perfect science in being a landlord. I've been a landlord for just over 16 years, almost 20 coming on. And I do love this profession, and it is a business. And so you've got to take it serious. You can't just willy-nilly throw down a lease that your aunt gave you that she bought at Office Depot and expect to be successful. You can't. To be successful is to be prepared. And, I learned this. To be proactive is much better than to be reactive. Be responsive instead of reactive. Okay, you want to respond instead of react. So if there is a conflict, you think about it and respond slowly. Don't just yell back. Hopefully this encourages you today. I don't know. It was a lot of content in a short amount of time. But that is life as a landlord. I know there's a lot of part-time landlords out there. Hopefully you gain some nuggets. If you like this episode, or you want to hear something else, or something that I didn't define properly, send me a note, send me encouragement, Facebook, leave a comment, whatever you do. Do it with power and do it to the best of your ability. But ultimately, buy assets, take care of yourself so you can take care of another person. This is Steve Van Kallenberg. You've listened to The Savvy Radio Show. I have other episodes. Go to thesavvyradioshow.com. Have a great day.
Investor Weekend is not far off, with over 10 information sessions to increase your portfolio. Log on to www.investorweekend.com. Whether you are a seasoned investor or never purchased a property before, you don't want to miss the Investor Weekend. Join us for a powerful, knowledge-packed weekend with over 10 informational sessions that are bound to enlarge your real estate investments. You will hear from the best national and local real estate investors that will share practical and relevant experiences with you, the investor. There will be several networking sessions to connect with other like-minded people for potential funding, partnerships, and yes, hot deals. Go to www.investorweekend.com. Did you know we meet once a month for the Landlord Lunch Meeting? The third Wednesday of every month. Go to landlordlunch.com.
Thanks for listening to The Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook, and always be buying assets.